As we look at our text this morning, we should be reminded that the narrative of this second chapter of Genesis, beginning in verse 4 and running through verse 25, is an elaboration, if you will, of God's work on the final day, the sixth day of creation. The events of this second chapter are to be understood as fitting within the framework of chapter 1, verses 24 through 31. We've seen so far in our study of chapter 2, we've seen the Lord forming Adam from the dust of the ground and breathing into him the celestial breath of life. Adam is then placed in the Edenic garden temple where he is to worship and serve his Creator. Further, we have seen that Adam is appointed as God's priest king, God's vice regent, if you will, in the earth. And as such, he is vested with the kingly authority to subdue and rule and to expand the temple presence and the worship of God until such time that it encompasses the entire earth. Additionally,
told me to adjust it if it was
all right.
popping.
Technical adjustment here.
Let's try that.
That better? Additionally, Adam was to serve in the temple paradise of Eden and keep the things of God within this temple paradise. He was to guard, if you will, the sanctity of both the presence and the commands of his God. And last week, we saw that Adam was given a commandment concerning the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. His obedience to this command would produce a fullness of life that he could enjoy there in the garden. But we saw that his disobedience to this command would result in his spiritual death and his expulsion from the garden. As we move further into the text of chapter 2 today, we are presented with the extraordinary occasion of Adam being given the gift of a bride by his Creator. As God's priest king and God's vice regent, Adam was in need of a helper to enable him to better accomplish God's purpose for humankind. As God's priest king and vice regent, he needed a comparable helper. We're going to consider this passage this morning under four headings. First, we will see a divine proclamation. It is not good that man should be alone. And then we will see God's remedy for that which is not good. I will make an helper fit for him. Secondly, we will note that Adam is subjected, and pay careful attention here, that Adam is subjected to a period of practical preparation. It is as Adam is obeying the dominion mandate that God has given him. It's as he is obeying this that he comes to realize his need of companionship and help. Thirdly, we will observe God's perfect provision for Adam as he creates the first bride from Adam's very side. Finally, we will consider the profound presentation that is made as God gives away his first daughter. And then we will make brief application of these truths. Let's begin with the divine proclamation of this text. In verse 18, we read that God declares and proclaims that it is not good that man should be alone. And what is startling about this, if we go back to Genesis chapter 1 and we understand that this section of verses actually fits into the framework and context of Genesis chapter 1, verses 24 through 31, if we understand that this is taking place on the sixth day, this declaration or this proclamation that there is something that is not good should be startling, because what happened at the end of the first 5 days of creation? God declared, it is good. But then we find in the midst of the sixth day of creation, God makes a declaration and a proclamation that it is not good that man should be alone. Not good is very strong language when you think about it in that context, isn't it? That's pretty strong language. And the way this is expressed, the way Moses narrates this, it indicates not only the absence of something good, but it indicates that when God says it is not good that man should be alone, it indicates that there is a real deficiency in Adam. There's something that is lacking. He is not yet complete in this garden paradise in which God has placed him. There is a substantial deficiency. Now, Adam may have had no idea that it was not good for him to be alone. In fact, Adam might not have known he was alone at this point. I mean, he's been given the garden, he's been given every tree and every fruit of the garden, he's been given the beast of the field, the fowls of the air, he's been given all of this. Adam, at this point in the progression of the sixth day, may very well not have realized that he was alone. But God declares, the sovereign declares unilaterally that it is not good that man is alone. What is he saying? I believe the statement here indicates that Adam was yet incomplete, and Adam was not able to function as a priest-king in God's creation and to advance the purpose of God for humankind without complementary help. His solitude was not good because he couldn't accomplish all that God had purposed for mankind. So God says it is not good for man to be alone. And this is really a principle that we see throughout Scripture, is it not? Remember the passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 9. It says, two are better than one. Why? Because they have a good reward for their toil. It's just a basic principle of life, is it not? That when our toil and our rewards are shared, that there is a richness in that. But I think even more profoundly than that, when we get over into the New Testament and you remember our teaching on Christ inaugurating the kingdom of heaven as he was incarnated, born, and began his ministry of healing, and he began to send out his disciples to advance the kingdom of heaven. And how did he send them out? How many at the time? He sent them out 2 by 2, did he not? And he called the 12 and began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the unclean spirits. Now remember, this is Christ inaugurating the kingdom. Christ is going to accomplish everything that Adam failed, and he begins this by sending out his disciples in pairs. The principle here is that with the union of these, with the two, that there is a richness and a goodness and a reward in the toil that takes place when there are two. So we see first of all in this passage that the sovereign unilateral declaration or assessment of God of the first man's solitude was that solitude was not good. He needed complementary help.